Aria's life in the quiet village was simple, yet filled with warmth. She was known for her kind heart and sharp mind, traits she had inherited from her late mother. After her mother's passing, Ariyah devoted herself to maintaining their home and supporting her father, who, though loving, was often distant, struggling with his grief. The bond between father and daughter was strong, but everything changed when he remarried. Zorina arrived like a storm, bringing with her an air of entitlement and her equally spoiled daughter, Layla. At first, Ariyah had hoped they could become a family, but it wasn't long before Zorina revealed her true nature. She was calculating and dismissive, treating Ariyah as little more than a servant. Layla, encouraged by her mother, wasted no opportunity to belittle Ariyah, flaunting her finery and ridiculing her simple clothes and modest lifestyle. Despite the cold treatment, Ariyah remained resilient. She found solace in her memories of her mother and in the beauty of the village that surrounded her. Yet, Zorina's disdain for Ariyah deepened with time. She saw Ariyah's natural charm and grace as a threat to Layla's ambitions. To Zorina, Ariyah was a rival, someone who could overshadow Layla in any social setting. The village was abuzz one sunny afternoon when news arrived that the royal family was hosting a grand ball. It was to be held in honor of Prince Kyle, who was seeking a bride. The announcement spread like wildfire, filling every corner of the village with excitement and speculation. The prince was renowned not just for his looks, but for his kind heart, and every eligible maiden dreamed of catching his eye. For Layla and Zorina, the ball was an opportunity too grand to miss. Zorina declared it the perfect chance for Layla to secure her future as a princess. Their home was thrown into chaos as preparations began, with Zorina sparing no expense on extravagant dresses and jewelry for her daughter. Aria, however, could only watch from the sidelines. She felt a flicker of hope at the idea of attending the ball, but she knew better than to voice her desires. Zorina had made it clear that Ariyah's place was at home, tending to the chores and ensuring that Layla looked her best. Even as excitement rippled through the village, Ariyah's heart ached quietly, her dreams buried beneath the weight of her stepmother's scorn. As the day of the ball drew closer, the excitement in the village reached a fever pitch. The streets bustled with merchants selling fine fabrics and jewelry, while hopeful young women visited tailors to have their dresses fitted. Ariyah watched the preparations with quiet longing, her heart aching at the thought of missing such a grand event. She spent her days helping Zorina and Layla prepare, silently enduring their commands and scornful remarks. Zorina, consumed by her ambition, was determined that Layla would win the prince's heart. She kept a sharp eye on Ariyah, noticing how even in her plain clothes and without adornments, she possessed an elegance that Layla lacked. This worried Zorina deeply, for she knew that Ariyah's beauty and kind heart could outshine Layla's artificial charm. Zorina made a firm decision. Ariyah would not attend the ball under any circumstances. One afternoon, Ariyah gathered the courage to ask if she might attend the ball. She timidly suggested that she could wear an old dress of her mother's, a simple yet elegant gown that held sentimental value. Zorina's lips curled into a cold smile as she responded, "The ball is no place for someone like you. Who would even notice you there?" Layla cackled in agreement, her laughter sharp and cruel. But Zorina didn't stop at mere words. That evening, while Ariyah was busy cleaning the house, Zorina snuck into her room and found the cherished dress. With a pair of scissors in hand, she cut into the fabric, ensuring it could never be worn again. She folded the ruined gown neatly and placed it back, her face devoid of remorse. The day of the ball arrived, and the house was alive with activity. Layla demanded constant attention, fussing over every detail of her appearance. Ariyah, despite her disappointment, worked tirelessly to assist her stepsister. She styled Layla's hair, adjusted her jewelry, and even polished her shoes. Each task was met with Layla's haughty commands and condescending remarks. "You'll never understand what it's like to be admired," Layla sneered as Ariyah helped her into her elaborate gown. "You belong here, scrubbing floors." Aria smiled faintly, refusing to let their cruelty break her spirit. As much as her heart ached, she couldn't bring herself to harbor resentment. Instead, she focused on helping others in the village. When a neighbor needed last-minute assistance with her dress, Ariyah offered to help. When a young girl cried over her torn sash, Ariyah quickly stitched it back together. Her selflessness earned her quiet gratitude from those around her, though it did little to ease her own sadness. As the carriage carrying Zorina and Layla rattled away towards the palace, Ariyah stood by the window, watching them disappear into the distance. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, her emotions a tangled mix of longing and acceptance. She whispered to herself, "It's enough to know I've done my part. This night belongs to others." Yet, deep inside, a tiny spark of hope remained. Ariyah's dreams, though suppressed, were not entirely extinguished. As the evening deepened and the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, Ariyah decided to step outside for a moment. She needed air, a brief escape from the loneliness that had settled heavily in her heart. The village was unusually quiet, as most of its inhabitants had already left for the palace, dressed in their finest. Ariyah wandered towards the market square, now empty and serene, her thoughts adrift. While passing by the fountain at the center of the square, Ariyah noticed a frail elderly woman struggling to carry a basket of fruits. Her instincts kicked in immediately, and she hurried over to help. "Let me carry that for you," Ariyah said with a warm smile, gently taking the basket from the woman's trembling hands. The old woman looked up, her wrinkled face softening with gratitude. "Thank you, my dear," she said, her voice raspy but kind. "You're a rare soul in a world so full of haste and selfishness." Ariyah walked the woman to a nearby bench, setting the basket down beside her. "It's nothing, really," Ariyah replied modestly. "Helping others brings me joy." The woman studied Ariyah for a moment, her eyes sharp and knowing despite her age. "Tell me, child, why are you not at the ball? A young woman like you should be dancing under the grand chandeliers, not wandering these empty streets." Ariyah's smile faltered as she glanced away. "It's complicated," she admitted softly. "Some dreams aren't meant for everyone." The old woman reached out and placed a hand on Ariyah's, her touch surprisingly warm. "Sometimes, the dreams that seem out of reach are the ones most worth pursuing." Her voice held a strange, almost melodic quality that seemed to resonate in the air. Before Ariyah could respond, the old woman rose to her feet with surprising agility. "You have a kind heart, my dear, and kindness deserves to be rewarded." With a wave of her hand, a soft glow surrounded her, and her frail appearance melted away. In her place stood a regal woman with flowing silver hair, her eyes sparkling like stars. Ariyah gasped, stepping back in astonishment. Who are you?" "I am an enchantress," the woman said with a gentle smile. "I travel the land in disguise, searching for those who embody true goodness. And you, Ariyah, are one such soul." Ariyah's hands flew to her mouth. "How do you know my name?" The enchantress chuckled. "I know many things, child, but tonight I am here to grant you what your heart desires." With another wave of her hand, a dazzling gown of shimmering silver appeared, its fabric sparkling like moonlight. Beside it materialized a pair of delicate glass slippers, a vision of beauty and elegance. Ariyah's eyes widened as she stared at the magical creations. I don't know what to say." "Say nothing," the enchantress replied kindly. "These gifts are yours. A carriage awaits to take you to the ball. But remember this, the magic will fade at the stroke of midnight. You must return home before then." Tears welled in Ariyah's eyes as she bowed her head. "Thank you. I promise I'll follow your instructions." The enchantress smiled, her gaze filled with warmth. "Go now, child. The night awaits you." Ariyah slipped into the gown, the fabric fitting her perfectly as if it had been made just for her. The glass slippers glimmered as she placed them on her feet, and she felt as though she were stepping into a dream. The enchantress led her to a magnificent carriage waiting nearby, its golden wheels gleaming in the moonlight. As Ariyah climbed inside, she glanced back at the enchantress, who gave her an encouraging nod. For the first time in what felt like forever, Aria's heart swelled with hope and excitement. The palace, the ball, and the possibility of a night to remember were now within her reach. The palace was breathtaking, glowing under the moonlight like a beacon of enchantment. Ariyah's carriage pulled up to the grand entrance, and her heart raced as she stepped out. She hesitated, staring up at the towering doors and the sounds of music and laughter spilling out into the night. Drawing a deep breath, she reminded herself of the enchantress's words and entered the ballroom. The moment she stepped inside, time seemed to stop. Heads turned, whispers spread like wildfire, and every eye in the room was on her. Ariyah's silver gown shimmered like starlight, and her poise was effortless, a quiet confidence shining through her modesty. She wasn't aware of the stir she was causing, her focus entirely on taking in the magnificent sight before her. The chandeliers, the intricate tapestries, the tables laden with food. At the far end of the ballroom stood Prince Kael, his expression bored, as another young woman prattled on about her wealth and connections. He had spent the evening enduring shallow conversations with guests who seemed more interested in his title than in knowing him as a person. As the young woman excused herself to grab a drink, Kael sighed, running a hand through his hair. That's when he saw her. Ariyah. She stood near the entrance, scanning the room as if she didn't quite belong, her hands nervously clutching the edges of her gown. But there was something about her, something genuine, untouched by pretense. Kael felt an inexplicable pull, his earlier disinterest melting away. For the first time that evening, he smiled. As Ariyah ventured further into the ballroom, she felt out of place amidst the finely dressed crowd. Layla and Zorina were nearby, their laughter ringing out as Layla flaunted her gown. Ariyah instinctively avoided them, fearing they'd recognize her. But before she could retreat to a quieter corner, a voice stopped her. "Would you honor me with a dance?" She turned to see Prince Kael standing before her, his piercing blue eyes warm and inviting. Her breath caught in her throat as she curtsied awkwardly. "Your Highness, I don't know if I'm—" "Nonsense," Kael interrupted gently, extending his hand. "I insist." Ariyah hesitated, but the sincerity in his smile reassured her. She placed her hand in his, and he led her to the dance floor. The orchestra began to play, and they moved together as if they had done so 1,000 times before. Around them, the crowd watched in awe, murmuring about the mysterious beauty who had captured the prince's attention. Layla, standing by the refreshments, froze mid-sip when she saw them. Her eyes narrowed, and her grip on her glass tightened. "Who does she think she is?" she hissed, turning to Zorina. "She's stealing my moment!" Zorina, equally displeased, whispered, "We'll deal with her later. Let's see how long she lasts." Meanwhile, Kael and Ariyah danced, their conversation flowing as naturally as the music. He asked her about her life, her dreams, and her thoughts on the world. Unlike the other women he'd met, Ariyah didn't try to impress him with exaggerated tales or compliments. She spoke with honesty and humility, her eyes lighting up when she talked about her love for helping others and her desire to see the world beyond her village. "You're not like anyone I've met before," Kael admitted, his voice soft. "Most people here want to be seen, but it's as if you'd rather disappear." Ariyah looked away, her cheeks flushing. "I'm not used to being in the spotlight, Your Highness." "Kael," he corrected with a smile. "Call me Kael." Their bond deepened with every word, every shared smile. Kael felt as though he had finally found someone who saw him as more than just a prince. But as the night wore on, Ariyah became increasingly aware of the time. The enchantress's warning echoed in her mind, and panic began to creep in. The clock began its climb towards midnight, and Ariyah suddenly pulled away. "I'm sorry, but I have to go." Kyle frowned, confused. "Wait, why? Did I say something wrong?" "No, it's not that," she said hurriedly, stepping back. "Please forgive me." Without another word, she turned and fled, weaving through the crowd. Kyle called after her, but she didn't stop. Layla and Zorina watched in disbelief as the mysterious woman bolted for the exit. In her haste, Ariyah didn't notice when one of her glass slippers slipped off. It clattered to the floor, catching Kale's attention. He picked it up, staring at it as if it held all the answers he needed. Determination filled his eyes. "I'll find her," he vowed. Outside, Ariyah climbed into the waiting carriage, her heart pounding as the clock struck 12. The magic began to fade, the carriage turning back into a simple cart, her gown transforming into her plain, tattered dress. She ran the rest of the way home, clutching the single glass slipper that remained. As she reached the house, breathless and trembling, Ariyah whispered a silent prayer of gratitude for the magical night she'd experienced. Little did she know, her life was about to change forever. The morning after the ball, the village buzzed with excitement. News spread like wildfire that Prince Kyle was desperately searching for the mysterious woman who had captured his heart, the woman who had left behind the glass slipper. It was said that the prince would visit every house in the kingdom, seeking the one who could fit the slipper. Zorina, sitting in the modest dining room with her daughter Layla, clenched her fists in fury as she heard the news. Her mind raced. The woman from the ball, the one who had outshone Layla, was none other than Ariyah. The realization hit her like a bolt of lightning. The girl she had looked down on, the one she had seen as nothing more than an obstacle, had caught the prince's eye. Her anger boiled over, and she slammed her hands on the table, making Layla flinch. "That wretched girl! How dare she take what belongs to you?" Zorina's voice was low and dangerous, her eyes flashing with rage. "She thinks she can steal your future, but I'll make sure she never sees the prince again." Layla, ever the spoiled and entitled daughter, pouted. "But mother, what about the slipper? The prince is looking for her. I don't know if I can compete with her." Zorina's eyes narrowed, a cunning glint in them. "You don't need to compete with her, my dear. You just need to take what is rightfully yours." She turned to Layla, a wicked smile curling her lips. "I'll make sure that slipper fits only you. And once it does, the prince will have no choice but to marry you." Without wasting a moment, Zorina hurried to the attic, where Ariyah had been sleeping in her small, humble room. The poor girl had no idea what was coming. With swift movements, Zorina unlocked the door and stormed inside, her footsteps heavy on the wooden floors. Ariyah, startled, looked up from where she sat near the small window. "What is it, stepmother?" Zorina's cold eyes glared down at her. "You're not going anywhere, Ariyah. Not today, not ever. I'll lock you away in this attic, and no one will ever know you were the one the prince is searching for." Ariyah's heart sank, panic rising in her chest. "You can't do this. I didn't mean any harm." But Zorina wasn't listening. She grabbed Ariyah's arm and shoved her toward the narrow staircase that led to the attic. "You've already ruined everything. The prince was supposed to marry my daughter, not some lowly girl who doesn't even belong here." With a forceful shove, Zorina locked Ariyah in the attic, throwing the key into her pocket. "You stay in there until I say otherwise. No one is going to come for you." She slammed the door shut, her voice trailing off as she walked away. Back downstairs, Zorina turned to Layla, who was standing by the doorway, watching with wide eyes. "Layla, listen to me. We'll make sure you're the one the prince finds. We'll use that slipper to trick him. I'll bribe the local officials, and you'll get your chance to meet him." Layla hesitated, her face still full of doubt. "But what if it doesn't fit? What if he sees through the lie?" Zorina's eyes darkened, her smile sharpening like a blade. Don't worry, my dear. I've thought of everything. We'll make sure the slipper fits perfectly, and once it does, the prince will have no choice but to marry you. She quickly set about making plans, sending for the town officials and arranging for Layla to meet the prince. A small fortune passed hands as Zorina bribed and manipulated those in power, ensuring that her daughter would be the one to try on the slipper when the prince's men arrived in the village. As she worked, she allowed herself a moment to relish the thought of Ariyah being locked away, her dreams crushed, her future stolen. Zorina couldn't help but laugh to herself. The prince would never find Ariyah, and Layla would take her rightful place by his side. Everything would be as it should have been from the start. But little did Zorina know, fate had other plans. The prince's quest to find the owner of the slipper was just beginning, and Ariyah's destiny was far from over. Prince Kale, determined and full of resolve, took matters into his own hands. After the grand ball and the mysterious woman who had captured his heart, he couldn't rest. His mind was consumed by thoughts of her, her kindness, her beauty, her authenticity that shone in a world so full of pretension. He knew without a doubt that she was the one, and he was ready to find her, no matter what it took. Riding with his most trusted guards, the prince made his way across the kingdom, visiting every village in his search for the owner of the glass slipper. He had the slipper with him, a symbol of his promise to find the woman who had left such an impression on him. His heart raced with anticipation as he approached the small village where Ariyah lived. When they arrived at the humble home, Zorina and Layla were already waiting. Zorina, ever the manipulator, greeted the prince with false sweetness, her eyes betraying her nervousness. Layla, trying to maintain her composure, stood beside her mother, pretending to be unaffected. The moment the prince stepped off his horse, Zorina wasted no time. "Your Highness, we are honored by your visit. It is truly a privilege to have you in our home." The prince barely acknowledged her words, his eyes scanning the two women. But his mind was focused solely on finding the one he had danced with that night. He stepped forward, holding out the glass slipper. "I am here to find the woman who belongs to this slipper. It is my belief that she lives here, in this village." Layla's heart raced with excitement, though she kept a mask of calm on her face. This was her moment, she thought. The slipper would fit her foot, and the prince would finally see her as the bride she had always expected to be. She moved forward eagerly, her hand outstretched for the slipper. Without a word, she placed her foot into the delicate shoe, her breath held in anticipation. But to her horror, the glass slipper did not fit. It was too small, the heel not touching her foot, the slipper slipping off with ease. The prince's face fell, his heart sinking as the truth began to dawn on him. "This is not the woman I seek," he said softly, disappointment in his voice. Zorina, quick to act, stepped forward, her voice smooth and insistent. "Your Highness, this is surely a mistake. My daughter is the perfect match for you. I'm certain of it. The slipper must be faulty, or perhaps the wrong woman tried it on before." She gave a forced laugh, attempting to cover up her anxiety. The prince looked at her, unconvinced but still polite. "I have traveled far, and I will not leave until I have found the woman who belongs to this slipper. If she does not reside here, then I will continue my search." Zorina's mind raced, her every move calculated. "Of course, Your Highness, I understand, but may I suggest you wait just a moment? Perhaps there is another woman in the village who may have tried the slipper on by mistake. I am sure you can find the right match if you take a little more time." The prince hesitated, his instincts telling him to leave, to continue his search elsewhere. But something in Zorina's persistence, her attempts to delay, raised his suspicions. He glanced at her and then at Layla, who now looked uncomfortable. Something wasn't right. "I will give you a moment," the prince said, but his eyes remained watchful, his mind still fixed on the woman he sought. As Zorina led him deeper into the house, trying to stall him with her incessant chatter, the prince's thoughts lingered on the ball, on the woman who had been so different from everyone else. He knew that the slipper would fit the one he had danced with, the one who had captured his heart. And though Zorina's manipulation might have bought her some time, Prince Kael's heart knew the truth. He was closer than ever to finding the woman who would change his life forever. The air in the attic was thick with dust, and Ariyah's heart pounded in her chest as she fought against the ropes that bound her. Zorina's cruelty had known no bounds, and locking Ariyah away in the attic was just the latest in a series of attempts to keep her from seeing the prince. But Ariyah's spirit was strong, and she refused to be a prisoner in her own home. A loyal servant, a kind woman who had witnessed Zorina's tyranny, quietly snuck up to the attic door. With a swift motion, she unlocked it and helped Ariyah escape. The servant whispered urgently, "Hurry, miss. The prince is in the village, and he's looking for you." Ariyah's heart skipped a beat. This was her chance, her only chance to prove to the prince who she truly was. She nodded gratefully to the servant, quickly gathering her strength as she fled the house. Her heart raced, and every step she took felt like fate pushing her closer to the prince who had stolen her heart from the very first moment. In the distance, she saw the prince's guards standing near Zorina's house, still uncertain of the woman who had captured the prince's heart. Ariyah's breath caught in her throat, but she knew she had to be brave. She approached them, her heart swelling with hope and fear in equal measure. The prince, noticing the familiar figure of the woman who had danced with him at the ball, stepped forward from the crowd. His eyes widened in recognition as Ariyah stood before him, her kind and graceful presence shining through despite the trials she had faced. Without a word, Ariyah knelt before the prince, holding out her foot, and the glass slipper was placed upon it. It fit perfectly, as it was always meant to. Ariyah's heart fluttered as she raised her eyes to meet the prince's. She knew this was the moment that would change everything. Prince Kael's eyes softened, his face breaking into a warm smile. He had found her, the woman who had touched his soul at the ball. "It's you," he said, his voice filled with awe and affection. "You are the one I've been searching for." Ariyah stood, a quiet smile on her lips. "I am sorry for the deception, Your Highness, but I could not allow myself to be kept hidden any longer. I am the woman you danced with at the ball." The crowd, who had gathered to witness this moment, murmured in surprise and admiration. Zorina, standing at the back, could no longer hide her shock and fury. Her eyes burned with hatred as she stepped forward, her hands trembling with rage. "No!" Zorina cried. "This is impossible! This cannot be the woman!" Prince Kael's gaze hardened as he turned toward Zorina. "You have lied to me, Zorina. Your schemes have been exposed, and you have sought to keep a good woman from the love she deserves." Zorina's face turned pale as her secrets unraveled before everyone's eyes. I did it for my daughter," she stammered, trying to regain some semblance of control. Layla was meant to marry the prince. But the prince would not hear another word. "Enough," he declared. "Your manipulations have gone on long enough. You and your daughter are no longer welcome in this kingdom. You will be banished, and never again will your deceitful ways harm another soul." As the prince spoke, the weight of Zorina and Layla's wrongdoings fell upon them. The kingdom had seen through their lies, and they were stripped of their power. In the end, it was Ariyah who stood victorious, her kindness and integrity having won the prince's heart. With a final glance at the defeated women, Prince Kael turned back to Ariyah, his eyes filled with admiration. "You are everything I've ever wanted, Ariyah. Will you be mine forever?" Ariyah's heart soared as she stepped forward and took his hand. "Yes, Your Highness, I will." Together they turned toward the future, leaving the past and its wicked schemes behind them. The grand celebration in the royal palace was beyond anything Ariyah had ever imagined. The entire kingdom had gathered to witness the union of the humble village girl and their beloved prince. The air was thick with excitement, and the atmosphere was filled with laughter, music, and joy. The people celebrated not just the marriage, but the love that had triumphed against all odds. Ariyah, radiant in her wedding gown, stood at the altar beside Prince Kael, who beamed with pride and affection. As they exchanged vows, their hearts intertwined with promises of forever. The prince had long since won her heart, but this moment, with all its beauty and grandeur, felt like a dream come true. The ceremony was everything Ariyah had hoped for, but as the celebration reached its peak, something magical happened. Amidst the merrymaking, the enchantress who had helped Ariyah at the ball appeared, stepping forward in a gown of shimmering light. Her presence seemed to fill the room with warmth and wonder. "Aria," the enchantress said, her voice soft yet powerful. "Your kindness and pure heart have earned the greatest reward. It was not just the prince you were destined for, but a love that would change your life and the lives of those around you. It is your compassion that has guided you here, and it is your heart that has brought light to this kingdom." The guests gasped in awe as the enchantress's true form became apparent. Ariyah's heart swelled with gratitude as the enchantress extended her hands, bestowing a blessing upon the couple. Her magic enveloped them both, and the couple felt a warmth that went beyond the physical. It was a blessing of love, happiness, and harmony for their future together. The enchantress smiled before fading into the crowd, her task fulfilled. Ariyah turned to the prince, her eyes glistening with happiness. "I'm so grateful for everything, Kael," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "This love is more than I ever dreamed." Prince Kael pulled her close, brushing a gentle kiss against her forehead. "And it is only just beginning, my love. Together, we will make this kingdom flourish." As the evening continued, a more somber moment arrived. Zorina and Layla, though they had been cast out, stood at the outskirts of the celebration. Ariyah saw them from across the room, and despite everything they had done, she felt a flicker of compassion in her heart. She excused herself from the festivities and made her way toward them. "I could never wish ill upon you," Ariyah said softly to Zorina and Layla, her voice steady. "You may have hurt me, but that does not mean I wish for your suffering. Life is long, and you both have time to change, to rebuild." Zorina's eyes filled with tears, but she remained silent, unable to meet Ariyah's gaze. Layla, too, seemed smaller than before, no longer the spoiled, arrogant girl she had once been. Ariyah gave them a kind, forgiving smile. "I hope you find your way," she added, turning to rejoin her husband. As she walked back to Prince Kael, the love and unity between them felt even more powerful than before. The prince placed his arm around her, his heart full of pride. "You are incredible, Ariyah. Your heart is a gift to us all." Ariyah smiled, her heart at peace. Love and kindness have a way of winning, don't they? She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the trials, the heartache, the unexpected kindness that had changed everything. Ariyah had always believed that goodness could overcome the darkness of the world, and now, standing in the arms of the prince she loved, she knew that her belief had been true. Love had triumphed over greed, and kindness had conquered deceit. As the night wore on, the kingdom celebrated not just a wedding, but a story of redemption and the power of a pure heart. And for Ariyah and Prince Kael, this was only the beginning of their happily ever after, a tale that would be remembered for generations to come.